So hello and welcome to this video with the Propellerhead's Reason software Complex-1. Now in this patch we're going to build up a nice arpeggio with lots of tonal changes and look at creating depths and layers and stereo space within Complex-1. Now I'm doing this from scratch. I've not pre-prepared it, so I don't know where it's going to end up other than I want to build an arpeggio kind of generator, interesting synth tone machine if you like. So I'll cut in, here's where we get to by the end of the video. Now I'm going to start by patching across the second oscillator from this complex oscillator. I want a sine wave, so I'm happy with that on there. Just simply into my mixer, and it's going to drone away. I'd like to be an octave lower, just tune down. I'm going to use the sequencer and note quantizer to generate some musical information. Now we have a clock, I'm going to patch that into the step, and that's going to start stepping through this sequence. I'm going to patch my note output up into the pitch control on the complex oscillator. Turning up the range. And I want this to be, let's say, a major 7 arpeggio. So I'm going to turn on the notes C, E, G, and B. And we might change those later on. I want a shorter sequence. I'm just adjusting the range there as well. Now I'd like some per step tonal changes, and we'll start to get some amplitude modulation, run this through those low pass gates or the VCAs as well, which you can do on the scale and amplifier section down here. First I'm going to patch my clock into the X input on the function generator. I'm going to turn this into a sample and hold. The Y input I'm going to take as white noise, which as we can see on the scope there, is just a random value. So every time this clock steps, it's going to pull a value, as you can see there on the scope, that's entirely random. Let's randomly change the FM between these two oscillators. And let's make this a sine as well. Could try syncing them. And there's some interesting tones there mixing the FM, which if I take this out, I'm actually turning that knob. I'd rather that be a smooth, controlled change in the tone. So let's try it with an LFO instead. Turn the rate down. And I'd like a triangle wave. Now we have this third oscillator. We control the range. It's a very kind of utilitarian oscillator with less of the kind of tonal control that the complex oscillator gives us. Now taking a triangle out of that, which is this default shape in the middle, I'm going to control the AM, which is the amplitude modulation of this second oscillator, the one that we're currently hearing. I'm also going to patch the note information into this oscillator so it tracks, so my modulation will track pitch alongside the complex oscillator. And I'm going to patch the inverted version of the LFO into the shape control. So as the FM goes up, the shape moves to the left. As the FM comes down, the shape control moves to the right. And with some interesting tones there, so I'm going to take this whole signal chain, currently coming out of the complex oscillator, into the first low pass gate, out of the low pass gate to my mixer. Now I'm using this center channel because we're going to use these two channels for some pan modulation later. Now I need something to strike this low pass gate. I'm going to take that same clock to the trigger in. We've already an interesting moving tone and now some rhythmic modulation as well. This sequencer at the bottom, the pattern generator, also gives us the option to turn gates on and off per step. So we could For example, take this gate into the low pass gate. Start to build up some interesting patterns that way. But for now, we're going to stick with the clock. We'll come to creating different patterns when we come to doing this stereo imaging on the two sides. We're going to layer up some different sounds. Now, the first thing I want to do with this is create some kind of ambience, some droning kind of texture to it. I'm going to come out of the oscillator into the comb delay, and out of the comb delay into this mixer. I'm making this fully wet, and I'll get rid of the cables here. I'm going to use this sample and hold that we were generating to control various parameters. And there's some real nice squidgy, feedbacky, pokey comb delay sounds, but I do really like it. So we can have this as a layer that we sit underneath our plucky version. Nice kind of feedback, it's quite intense. We could of course go in and try and trim this back a little bit. It's a little bit better behaved. And just so we get more of a high-end texture, let's take it through the filter and come out of the high pass. And I'll use that same sample and hold to modulate the cutoff, and I'll use the LFO as well. And we've got quite an interesting texture. Again, against that sound. Quite like that. Let's leave that as one of several layers. So taking this oscillator into the wave shaper next, I'm going to use a wave folder and come out into the third channel on my mixer for now. And I'd like some more complex modulation for the folder, so I'm going to use one of these mixers, taking in sample and hold and the LFO, then patching out of the mixer into the folder. Now I'm not as keen on those kind of harsher stepped modulations from the sample and hold, so I'm going to run it into this lag processor. And a lag processor will smooth out the edges. Think of it as a filter for your sub-audio modulation. It could take a square wave LFO and round it down into a more sine-like LFO. So this will take the hard stepped changes from the sample and hold and round them off with some slew, lag or glide, or often portamento it's called if it was pitch. So coming out into this mixer again, it just means we've now got some smooth changes, and we'll patch this inverted LFO to the symmetry. Much more aggressive sound. So that's going to come into the second low pass gate, out into mixer channel 3 again, and we'll use this gate rhythm that we've generated to strike. So with a different rhythm there, this kind of feedbacky, quirky texture. Again, quite harsh, but I do really like it. Let's turn the resonance up. And we could get rid of that being this harsher, high-end texture and simply come out of the low-pass filter instead of the high-pass filter. But I preferred the kind of high-end, feedbacky type stuff. I'm now going to take the LFO into the panning, turn up both mixer channels, and invert the way it modulates these two side channels. So these now cross over with a folder moving one way as the feedback texture moves the other. And right down the center, we've got this interesting kind of swirling texture. Now we could make this a, say, minor 7 arpeggio. Start to change what chord tones are available. What we could do if you wanted to control this via MIDI would be to simply take all of these clocks out, take your gates from this top section, which is the kind of MIDI input section, which will come from your sequencer down below if you were to have a pattern playing, or from a MIDI controller, and then take the pitch information from your key outputs there up top as well. And just a little spice, because there's some great sounding effects, so why not use them? Let's just check out. Bit of echo over it, because why not? And we've got this kind of nice 3D depth, some interesting tonal modulations, and a simple arpeggiator. Let's change the sequence a little bit, let's add a few more steps. Maybe up the range. And it's a really nice way to jam and play around. Hope this has been useful. This patch and some other bonus patches will be available in the description below. I'll put together some information about the patch and the actual patches, and I've also got some default patches in Complex-1. It's very nice working with propeller heads to do that. So thanks for watching this video, hope it's been useful. Hit like, subscribe, all the usual kind of gabber that you see at the end of a video. Cheers for watching.